Did you know that when allowed to climb, Manjula pothos can grow into this? Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's been a while that I've done a plant spotlight, so I thought I'd focus on a plant that always gets a lot of attention whenever I post a video, my Manjula pothos. As always with my plant spotlights, first I'm going to talk to you about the journey the plant and I have been through together, and then I'm going to let you know anything that I've learned about this plant. But before we get started, we just hit 100,000 subscribers. That is insane. Braddles, are you excited? I don't think he's quite as excited as I am. I don't think he necessarily knows what it means, but I'm pretty sure most of you are here for bread. But no, on a serious note, that's crazy. I've only started YouTube about 7-8 months ago, and I was always really self-conscious about talking about plants online, putting my opinions out there. I wasn't too sure. Like, I see myself as a hobby grower. I'm definitely a hobby grower. I didn't study this. I just have a great passion for plants, and I want to share that passion with you. So it's really exciting to me that there's so many people that share that passion and who like to tune in and are interested in knowing what I've got to say. Sorry, cat hair everywhere. So I wanted to say a massive thank you to all of you who have supported me. The best support you can give me is honestly just watch my content, share my content so I can reach other audiences. That is honestly the best thing you can do to support me, and I really appreciate every single one of you. So a massive thank you to all of you. So let's get started. I don't remember exactly when I got this plant, but I've got a photo from September 2021, and at that stage I was actually just growing it in a pot. I didn't really give it a moss pole straight away. I don't know, like at that time I was really after velvet philodendron, so I kind of saved my moss poles for those, and I just thought, you know what, I'll just let it trail. In my opinion, it is quite a slow grower anyway, so I figured, you know what, I'll just do nothing with it. In hindsight, I should have really given that plant a moss pole much earlier on. So you can really see by that photo, I kind of let it just grow back and forth within the pod. I didn't really do anything with it. And then sometime between September 21 and January 2022, I actually decided to give it a moss pole. I don't remember the exact day or the exact month, and I couldn't really find a photo either. But in that photo from January 2022, you can see that the plant has just really started climbing that moss pole. So at that stage, I repotted it, I kept it in a 14 centimeter pot, and I gave it one of my normal 90 centimeter poles with a 6 centimeter diameter, which is this pole at the bottom. It's still on its original pole. And well, you can see it doesn't really have all of these original leaves anymore. I think you can't see anyway, it's out of frame, but if I lift it up, so if you can see, it doesn't really have all of these original leaves anymore, but that's okay. It grew plenty in between. By Feb 22, you can see that it has definitely taken onto the moss pole and it starts to climb. It is definitely increasing in leaf size, but nothing dramatic. I have to admit, back then I also didn't give it the best light conditions. If I would have wanted it to mature faster, I could have given it plenty more light, specifically given it is very highly variegated. The brighter of a spot you can give this plant, the better. Because, well, it relies on just a little bit of green to do all of the work. So you need to provide the green bits with as much light as possible to optimize photosynthesis. By March 2022, I then decided, you know what, let's give this its best shot. And I moved it from in a darkish corner in my living room to my bedroom. Now, my bedroom has usually the best conditions. It has the most consistent conditions. It doesn't necessarily get the most light, but it gets very consistent light because I use my mother grow lights. So they're on for 14 hours a day, which means that every day they're exposed to the same amount of light. And plants really love consistency. If you're interested to learn more about the mother grow lights, I'll link a video in the description below, and I also have a discount code Sydney Plant Guy if you would like to get a little discount on a purchase. Well, then you can really see that between March and July the plant has definitely started increasing in leaf size. Now that is not necessarily just because of the light. Of course, light without enough light, the plants would never really increase in leaf size. But also, well, by now the plant has really taken to the moss pole. It has started growing lots of roots into the moss pole, so it has expanded its root system. And also, all the other conditions in my bedroom are very consistent, like very consistent humidity around 60 to 70%. And as I said, plants really love consistency. So it really started bringing out the best in this plant. In August 2022, it then reached the top of its first 90 centimeter moss pole, so that was about here, and then again gave it an extension with another 90 centimeter moss pole to make the pole 180 centimeters tall. That's also when I then repotted from a 14 centimeter pot into a 20 centimeter pot. Not necessarily because it's so root bound, most of the roots would be within the moss pole in itself, but more because, well, the taller the pole, the more top heavy it gets. So I wanted to give it a slightly larger base to stand on. So I moved from 14 to a 20 centimeter pot, and that's the pot it's still in. And you can see, I mean, I don't know if you can see it from there, I can see it from here. I can see a few roots, but honestly, not that much. It's nothing crazy. So the 20 centimeter plot is plenty of room. I don't think I need to repot this anytime soon. It's really just so it gives it a little larger base to stand on. While we're talking about repotting, I use my regular aeroid mix. So my aeroid mix is a very chunky and well-draining mix, and I use that for all of my aeroids. So aeroids are pothos, philodendron, monsteras, anthuriums, syngoniums. And that way I really also never really have to worry about overwatering, but let's talk about watering at the end. Let's continue through with the journey. Well, it didn't take long to start growing onto its extension. I put a photo up on screen in October 2022, and you can see that the leaves are continuously increasing in leaf size. So I know that whatever I'm doing the right thing, and I just keep doing what I'm doing, and I should continuously see larger and larger leaves, which, well, I am seeing. And then lastly, eventually it grew a little bit too big for my bedroom, or I kind of rearranged my plants and I kind of made my bedroom exclusively for velvet philodendron. So in December 2022, it had to move out of the bedroom, and it now lives right behind me or right next to me over here. So this is kind of its forever spot. So let's talk about the conditions I give this. Right now, and it still continuously increases, so I believe that whatever I'm doing right now is still definitely working. Right now it is getting just natural light. There's an east-facing window over here, so it gets a little bit of morning sun, and then it gets bright indirect light throughout the day. In summer, it gets more bright indirect light because the sun moves much higher up in the sky. In winter, it actually gets way more direct sun. Well, it hasn't really gone through a winter over here, but in winter it would get much more direct sun, specifically in the morning, which is okay because the winter sun isn't quite as harsh as it is during summer. So again, light is probably the most important factor with all of the plants if you want to see them mature. But specifically, if you have a plant that is very highly variegated, you need to make sure that you give it enough light. The white bits, and I mean that's really what Manjula is known for. Manjula is actually a patented cultivar. It was selected to be this highly variegated. That's kind of like, is its whole appeal. But with highly variegated plants, the problem is that, well, the white bits can't contribute to photosynthesis, only the green bits can, which means that, well, let's have a look at this leaf, for example. There isn't really that much of the leaf that can contribute to photosynthesis. Some leaves are a little bit better than others, like this one has a little bit more green, so obviously it can contribute to photosynthesis more. This one is probably a little bit more on the white side, and the tallest one at the top is... I'm really liking that at the moment. But there are some almost fully white leaves, right? So they are pretty useless to the plant. So the little bits of green just really have to be provided with as much light as possible. But of course, you still don't want to burn it either. On the note of burning, it is totally normal to potentially see some browning of leaves, specifically if they're a little bit older and specifically if they're super white. Those are just useless to the plant. By the way, in case you can see the leaves kind of like swaying in the wind, it is a scorcher of a day today, and I just got the fan on, and I hope it's not going to cause too much noise for you guys listening. Alright, so that covers light. From a temperature perspective, my apartment doesn't really drop below 20 degrees because, well, I live here and I don't really want it to drop below 20 degrees. So it would be totally fine with lower temperatures. It would definitely not tolerate freezing. I would probably not recommend anything under 15. It can probably survive under 15 degrees Celsius easy, but it's not gonna grow and thrive. And I suppose I want my plants to thrive, not just necessarily survive. It can definitely tolerate much warmer temperatures as well. I would go, anything 30, 35-ish, it shouldn't really have a problem with, but I would say the average temperature in here is probably between 20 in winter and up to 28 in summer. So it definitely likes the warmer temperatures, but it's still, you can see it continues increase in leaf size. So even during winter, it was sizing up despite the fact that it wasn't super warm. Now the humidity in this room is a little bit lower than it was in the bedroom. So in the bedroom it usually gets between 60 to 70% humidity, and in here it gets between 50 to 60% humidity. But I don't supplement humidity. I control humidity just through opening the windows. But ultimately the humidity in here is very much subject to the humidity outside. So the other day, for example, it was 28% humidity, and then yesterday we had storms, and today it's really hot. So it's very, very humid today. So today it's probably like 76% of humidity in here, which, by the way, no, it is not dangerous. The houses in Australia are built to cope with that, right? If it's 80% humidity outside and I open the window, how is it not going to be 80% of humidity in here? You cannot compare that to the houses, like to European houses that are really built to insulate so well. Once the humidity of 80% is in there, you'll never get that out of there again. So that's kind of the environmental factors. Of course, airflow, there is a window over here and I love keeping the window open, but as you can see, also when I've got a fan on, there's always going to be some sort of airflow. Airflow is really important to plants. It mimics wind. It's like when I shake it, like that is what the wind does in nature. It is not a bad thing. Plants build resilience based on that. Like those plants in the rainforest, they would get bashed by some rainstorms, by some crazy winds. Like they are much stronger than you think they are, specifically if they're healthy. If they're healthy plants, they can cope with quite a bit of wind and rain and so on. I had a question the other day. Somebody asked me if a new leaf is gonna rot if it gets wet. Like, if that theory would be true, there would be no plants in the rainforest because, well, it's raining every day. Rain or water is not a bad thing as long as you keep airflow up and the rain isn't, or the water isn't just sitting on that leaf and not ever evaporating. That's what could cause fungal issues, what you then basically experience as a rotten leaf. As long as you keep airflow up, getting your leaves wet is totally normal, and that's basically the only thing I do to actually clean these plants. I have way too many plants with way too many leaves for me to go around and wipe every single leaf. I just take them to the bathtub and I spray them with a pressure sprayer, like obviously not like a high pressure sprayer, just like a hose or like the shower head. You can use the shower head just to wipe any dust and or cat hair off it so it can optimize photosynthesis. Alright, that's kind of the environmental factors, and that's those are the things that I don't necessarily control, or I don't really have that much control over. That's really the natural environment, and that is not unique to this plant. All of the plants around here, they live here and they all get the same environmental conditions. I select them. I select the plants that I know will be happy with my environmental conditions. Now it is a pothos, it's an Epipremnum aureum technically, and pothos are known to be very easy plants. You see them in offices and so on. So yes, they can totally tolerate lower humidity, they can totally tolerate lower temperatures, lower light conditions and so on. But if you want to see your plant mature and give you these beautiful leaves like the ones at the top over here, then you don't want to go with like the bare minimum or like the conditions that it can tolerate. You want to give it the best possible conditions, and they are usually more tropical, and that's when you really see like the increase in leaf size and the plant growing to its full potential. From a care perspective, well, I've got it on my moss poles. I make these moss poles myself, and if you want to learn more about these moss poles, I've got a full moss pole playlist with a tutorial on how to make them, how to water them, how to extend them, how to chop and extend them, how to pot them up with my aeroid mix, and so on. The moss pole is essential because every single node is rooting into the moss pole, and that creates a very large root system vertically. So I get away with really small pots. If this pot is not even halfway filled with roots, right? And the reason why is because it has all of its roots like in the moss pole, which also means that I need to treat the moss pole like I would ordinarily treat a pot. So I need to keep it moist. Big misconception is that a lot of plants, specifically pothos, like drying out. They are tolerant to drying out compared to like a philodendron verrucosum because they've got much thicker roots and they've got much thicker leathery leaves. But that doesn't mean that that's their preference. They prefer consistency. If you let a plant dry out and then water it, dry out and then water it, you're running risk that the roots dry out too much, and then when you water, the roots actually can't absorb the water because they died, because they were too crispy, and then you see root rot because these roots now sit in water that they can't actually absorb, and yeah, that's what you then call overwatering. Overwatering can actually come from firstly underwatering them and then watering them too much. They're not cacti, they are aeroids. They grow in tropical rainforests where it's always humid. But what people basically, when people give you these tips of like let the medium dry out, yes, it is safer to underwater than to overwater. If you have a very water retaining mix, then it is much safer to let it dry out and then water it, then continuously water it. If you have a very chunky aeroid mix like I do and the water just drains through, then you shouldn't really have to worry about overwatering, but you definitely don't want to let it dry out fully. Same goes for the moss pole. I do not want to let the moss pole dry out fully. If I let the moss pole dry out fully, well, probably 80% of the root system is within the moss pole in itself. So yeah, if I let the moss pole dry out and then I water it, those roots could have died in between because they dried out too much, and then when I water it, they're just gonna rot. So I want to keep it continuously moist, and I just do that by giving it the crunch test. So if I squeeze the moss pole and it makes a crunchy sound, then it's dry. I take a water bottle, I flip it upside down, and that's as easy as it is. Gravity is going to make the water drain through into the pot, and then maybe 30 minutes after I water it, I lift up the pot and I see if there's any excess water. The best and the most well-draining and aerated mix doesn't help you if it's actually sitting in water. So you do need to make sure that you empty out the pot. But over the years, I've gotten so good at knowing how much water each of my moss poles can absorb that really hardly ever happens to me. Quite frankly, I have way too many plants to be able to take them all out of the pot, empty the pot, and so on. I really rely on me knowing how much water each of these poles need. And I know I can't necessarily give you a frequency because that changes with the seasons. So it's not like every week I give it 1 liter of water and then in winter I give it half a liter, or in summer I give it 2 liters. Like, it's not like one day is winter and then the next day is summer. It's a gradual change. So yes, in summer I water it more frequently, maybe twice a week. In winter, maybe once a week is okay. But I don't necessarily like to talk about frequencies or volume of water and say like, oh, exactly 1 liter of water once a week. It could be so different depending on how dry your environment is, how big the plant is, how big the moss pole is, how big the root system is, how big the leaves are, how much light it gets, and so on. So stick to the principle, keep the moss pole moist. However often you have to do that, how much water that takes, that is something that unfortunately you will have to figure out for yourself. I can't make that learning for you, but what I can tell you is that you can totally keep that moss pole moist. You do not need to let it dry out. However, again, it is more tolerant to drying out a little bit than it being overwatered. So you don't want to just pour liters and liters and liters of water over it again and again and again. Roots need oxygen, and if you let it dry out a little bit, the roots can breathe, basically. That's also one of the reasons why I do like my open moss poles. Sometimes I use the plastic backed ones, sometimes I use the open moss pole. So this is an open moss pole over here. And you can see some roots come back out at the end. There's definitely some roots within the moss pole that we now can't see, but roots love oxygen. So it's not a bad thing for these roots to come out and then crawl along the moss pole. They're appreciative of that. And the last thing, of course, with everything that needs to grow, you need to feed it. So I provided a liquid nutrient. It's Growth Technology Australia Foliage Focus, and I put 5 milliliters of nutrients in 1 liter of water at least once a week when I water it. So every Saturday or every Friday, Saturday when I water it, I would put a little bit of fertilizer in it. If I forget about it a week, that's totally fine. It's actually good to just flush out all of the medium as well so that there's no mineral buildup. But I don't think you necessarily need to worry about over fertilizing if you stick to the weak dilution that I'm using. Now, of course, I know that Growth Technology Australia is expanding to other countries, but it's predominantly sold in Australia. So obviously, and honestly, I'm just using it as per the recommendation on the bottle. So I can't really give you an alternative because I haven't really grown plants in any other country or have used any other products. But I suppose the people that produce the product, they are the ones that have the best knowledge about the product. So I just went with the product recommendations on the bottle. But the whole idea is that it's not a fertilizer, it's a liquid nutrient. What's the difference? Well, a fertilizer relies on bacteria within the medium to actually break down the fertilizer into the 12 nutrients that plants require to thrive. I just provide them with the 12 nutrients straight away. These nutrients are ready to be absorbed. So when I water the moss pole with this, and yes, I put it in the water that I put in the moss pole and I just let it drain through. When I water the moss pole with it, the plant can just absorb these nutrients straight away. Not just the root system within the pot. Every single node has created its own root system within the pole, and every single node can now absorb the water and the nutrients, just really giving the plant the best chances of growing large. I don't know if this will ever fenestrate. I don't know how large it can get. I've definitely seen some larger ones, larger than mine on the internet, but most of them I see are being grown as a trailing plant. So I honestly don't know where its potential is gonna go, and that is super exciting to me. I can't wait to see in a few months, years time, how big I might be able to grow this plant. In a nutshell, if you want to transform your Manjula from the normal Manjula that you see in a lot of nurseries to one of these beautiful Manjulas with large leaves, you definitely need to provide it with support. You need to have sufficient light, and you definitely need to make sure that you give it very consistent conditions and consistent care. And never ever underestimate the importance of feeding your plant the nutrients that it requires to really grow at its best. I really hope you enjoyed this. Please feel free to check out my moss pole playlist. I'll link it over here for you. Everything that I know about moss poles and my care approach is in that playlist. So if you have any further questions, I reckon they'll be answered by looking through the videos in that playlist. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, leave a nice comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye.